There's a challenge that's going on with change that I think is worth some exploring. And I'd like to diagram it out for you. And in a moment, I'm going to illustrate it. You're going to see me drawing an illustration of one of the biggest challenges that holds people back from creating lasting change. I'm sure you've heard umpteen times or umpteen reasons why people are trespassed against in their success. You know, there's so many reasons that people don't get successful. And I'd like to invite you to apply another lens, what I call a structural lens, to looking at some of the most plaguing, complex, and subtle reasons why individuals just don't seem to create effectively, at least for the long term, what it is they want to create. And I have had 18 years at looking at this dynamic thousands and thousands of times. I think what I'm about to show you is the heartbeat, the center of what resists great changes from happening. And it's almost so simple and subtle, it's easy to miss. So here we go.
So you make an attempt, you start from point A, and you make an attempt to create a goal, right? So we have a desire for change, and then of course change effort. A change effort would suggest that we act on it. And there's a difference between point A and point B, obviously, right? So what's going on today is discrepant to or in contrast to what would be real or what we want to bring into a solid state tomorrow. This is the traditional goal setting pattern, right? Now I've drawn another system here. So the one I just drew was on the previous page was the desire for change and then change effort or acting on it. And so we act upon it. And as we do that, we build up momentum and things get exciting and we are encouraged to continue growing. But to continue growing, more. More stuff, more weight, more responsibility, more detail. And when this becomes massive, what happens is that it blocks the continuity of growth. So our success is neutralized by this limit to growth. And I call this the plateau of progress. It's a built-in arc to a successful pattern. Because as an entrepreneur desires big things, big plans and so forth, they overwhelm themselves with more requirements than their personal hard drive can handle. They don't have the space for it. And so what they're faced with is two things. They try to maintain some level of control, but to grow, they have to let it go. And this creates a very interesting dynamic. But what happens is a very interesting belief starts to get embedded. And there's a belief that I'm almost so busy that I'm too busy being busy to do what could make me a lot less busy. And this is something I call the if factor. The if factor is incessant freneticness. The work appears to be so incessantly frenetic that the way we see things, we begin to fatalize our chances for continuity, for more growth, because we have an if factor that is at play in our path. We're too busy being busy to do what could make us a lot less busy. So you might ask, well, what's the shift then? You know, and this is the thing this is kind of the blind spot, is that it's not about a shift of the stuff around you. It's a shift of mind, a fundamental shift of mind. It's not that I'm too busy. It's that I think I'm so busy that I can't do anything to make me a lot less busy. And so if I try to change the pieces around what's outside the mind, I'm still overwhelmed, because being overwhelmed isn't having too much to do. It's everything having equal meaning. So if I have everything being equal, there's no way to achieve any sense of forward mobility or continued growth, because there's too much on my hard drive and I don't have the personal RAM to handle it. So there's a shift of mind. I have to address or come to terms with or let go of my if factor. The fact is, I'm not too busy being busy to do what could make me a lot less busy. That's the blind spot. I have a lot on my plate. We all do. We could work our business 24/7. We all have the same amount of time. It's not about that. It's about priorities. And priorities is about ourselves. Priority management is self-management. So we need to resign from everything being equal and start to create a counterbalance where we distinguish what has meaning and what doesn't. There's a hierarchy of importance. And the hierarchy of importance is what equals simplicity. Some things matter more than others. And that's not easy for some of us, because that means we're going to have to make some trade-offs. But not everything can be equal. So real balance, it means counterbalance. It means that we have different meanings around different things. And we kind of work from the inside out, that what we have internally is what we need to represent externally. So what matters to you becomes a very, very important point of origin. It's the centerpiece. It is the center from which we organize our decisions. And the reason why I say it's a shift of mind, what I call a metanoia, or a shift of mind, is that there is a difference in how we orient ourselves in our life. We can have what's called a creative orientation, what I call C state, or we can be in a reaction and response orientation, what I call R state. In this state, we react and respond to circumstances, and what happens to us becomes the governing force in our life. In C state, it's about our choices. Circumstances, choices. When we operate from our choices, we have some creative freedom to mix the pieces around, to arrange things differently such that we can change how we experience our manner of life. So we're not too busy being busy to do what can make us a lot less busy. We're confronted with the fact that not everything has equal meaning. How do we move to C state? Well, that's it right there. It's almost so simple, it's hard, isn't it? How we move to C state is we begin by, having a vision. A lovely picture of the future that we seek to create. By comparison, we have a current reality. But we don't just think about our reality. We don't just edit our reality. We have a actual conversation, a real conversation about where we really are in all aspects.
Is that eye-opening for you? It's interesting when we turn our attention back to what's behind our eyes and to look at how we're looking at things. And I think that's one of the beauties of coaching, is that we require another to see our own face, to see how we see, to see how our perceptions and our mental models and the way that we look at things actually shapes what we experience. And that when we have a shift of mind, when we have a metanoia, and we move to a more creative orientation in the way that we approach life, our manner of living, suddenly everything becomes more mobile and more liberated, because current reality is just an acquired taste. All you have is you have the current state. And yet nothing's disqualified you from choosing what really does matter. And as you make those choices toward reflection on what really does matter, your vision, and you have a clear picture of the reality, what's on the table, you can begin to move the pieces around with these points of reference of how do I get from here
compared to
here.
where we want to be. And the difference between these two is where the real strategy comes in. Is we're going to be starting, stopping, and continuing certain content. We're going to have to eliminate, we're going to have to negate, we're going to have to automate, we're going to have to delegate, we're going to have to determine what stays and what goes. We're going to clear the decks for action. And clear the decks for action means that everything that we organize or reorganize is within the scope of what serves our vision, and the things that don't matter, they need to be either delegated, automated, or negated. But we have to make decisions. So by knowing what does matter and doesn't matter, we're able to better prioritize how to organize our energy, what to choose over other things. So it's not about being busy. You see, that's the blind spot. It's more about how we make choices and the inner place or the orientation toward life that we choose to operate from. We can either live by a life plan, or we can choose to react and respond to our circumstances.
I think we've kind of forgotten what we know. You know, as parents, we all know what the creative orientation is about because we've raised children. And by raising children, we've put all of our energy into the children and focused on our creation in bringing them successfully into life. And yeah, there's a lot to do. There's so many options and things we can do to foster that process. But we organize our movements based on the assigned importance that we have on what we want. And if we could just remember how genius that is to orient ourselves to the creations that we want to create instead of orienting ourselves in reaction and response to the circumstances that happen, we would live in a more generative orientation, and I think we'd be more involved in what we're doing. We'd learn more from how we're living. We would have a greater sense of ourselves because we would be using our aims, our talents, our resources. We'd utilize our relationships. All the moments, all the things that we have around us, even if they're negative, become enlightening and constructive in putting us closer toward what we want to create. I think also it would be a very dynamic opportunity to see when individuals are creating, they don't overlook other aspects involving other people. They're more generous and they tend to be more in touch with creating more value in the world and paying more attention to how their lives are affecting the other or how others are affecting their own lives. So altogether, the way to kind of fuse together the intellectual, emotional, and spiritual intelligence is through the creative act, through the creative habit. I hope this was helpful for you. It's a raw video that I just put together as I had a cool thought I wanted to share with you. This is JD, VIP Coach.